Welcome to Preeminent Test Prep. Today I'll be taking you through the reading section of SAT Practice Test 8. I'll be giving you my tips and tricks for the reading section, as well as answer explanations for each question in each passage given here. Make sure to subscribe for more content, and let's go ahead and get started with question 1 in passage 1. So I'm going to go ahead and read passage 1, and then that'll take me about 3 minutes, and then I'll go ahead and get into the questions. So if you've already read the passage, you can go ahead and skip about 3 minutes forward, and that'll be about where I'm answering the questions. So we've got questions 1 through 10 are based on this passage. The passage is from Carlos Ruiz Zafón, The Angel's Game, written in 2008 by DragonWorks, or published in 2008 by DragonWorks SL Translation. And then in 2009, it was translated by Lucia Graves. The narrator, a writer, recalls his childhood in early 20th century Barcelona. Early 20th century means early 1900s. So now we'll go ahead and read the passage. Even then, my only friends were made of paper and ink. At school, I had learned to read and write long before the other children. Where my school friends saw notches of ink on incomprehensible pages, I saw light, streets, and people. Words and the mystery of their hidden science fascinated me, and I saw them in a key with which I could unlock a boundless world, a safe haven from that home. Those streets and those troubled days in which even I could sense that only a limited fortune awaited me. My father didn't like to see books in the house. There was something about them, apart from the letters he could not decipher, that offended him. He used to tell me that as soon as I was 10, he would send me off to work and that I'd better get rid of all my scatterbrained ideas if I didn't want to end up a loser, a nobody. I used to hide my books under the mattress and wait for him to go out or fall asleep so that I could read. Once he caught me reading at night and flew into a rage. He tore the book from my hands and flung it out the window. If I catch you wasting electricity again, reading all this nonsense, you'll be sorry. My father was not a miser, and despite the hardships we suffered, whenever he could, he gave me a few coins so that I could buy myself some treats, like the other children. He was convinced that I spent them on licorice sticks, sunflower seeds, or sweets, but I would keep them in a coffee tin under my bed, and when I'd collected 4 or 5 reals, I'd secretly rush out to buy myself a book. My favorite place in the whole city was the Sempier & Sons bookshop on Calle Santa Ana. It smelled of old paper and dust, and it was my sanctuary, my refuge. The bookseller would let me sit on a chair in a corner and read any book I liked to my heart's content. He hardly ever allowed me to pay for the books he placed in my hands. But when he wasn't looking, I'd leave the coins I'd managed to collect on the counter before I left. It was only a small change. If I'd had to buy the book with pittance, I would probably have been able to afford only a booklet of cigarette papers. When it was time for me to leave, I would do so dragging my feet, a weight on my soul. If it had been up to me, I would have stayed there forever. One Christmas, Sempier gave me the best gift I have ever received. It was an old volume read and experienced to the full. Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. I read on the cover. I was aware that Sempier knew a few authors who frequented his establishment, and judging by the care with which he handled the volume, I thought perhaps Mr. Dickens was one of them. A friend of yours? A lifelong friend, and from now on he's your friend too. That afternoon, I took my new friend home, hidden under my clothes so that my father wouldn't see it. It was a rainy winter with days as gray as lead, and I read Great Expectations about 9 times, partly because I had no other book at hand, partly because I did not think there could be a better one in the whole world, and I was beginning to suspect that Mr. Dickens had written it just for me. Soon I was convinced that I didn't want to do anything else in life but learn to do what Mr. Dickens had done. All right, now we can go ahead and get into the questions. We have question 1. Over the course of the passage, the main focus shifts from what? All right, so before I look at my answer choices, I'm going to come up with my answer, so that way I'm not swayed by my answer choices and I don't get stuck between two. So if I go to the beginning, I see him starting out with a description of the reader's childhood and how he loved reading, even though his friends at school didn't, so he was kind of different, and how his father didn't like him reading either. So it's kind of his relationship with reading and how he loved it and was passionate about it. And then I see as I move on, I move from that into his relationship with Sempier in the bookstore, right? And how he loved reading so much. He'd go to this bookstore, he would get these books, and he'd read them, and then he was given the book that he loved so much, right? The book that changes his career choice, essentially, even though he didn't have one before. It kind of gives him his inspiration. Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, right? So that's kind of like a big encounter he has with Sempier when he gets that book. So we go find which choice is the same as what we just said. We have a general description or a general discussion of the narrator's love of reading. Yep, in the beginning we talked about his love of reading, right? That background information. To a portrayal of an influential incident. That influential incident is when he receives Charles Dickens' book, right? Great Expectations, and that tells him that he wants to learn to do what Mr. Dickens had done. He wants to be an author, right? So that's going to be our answer there. That's going to be answer choice A. So we can get rid of B, C, and D. We can go ahead and move on to question 2. The main purpose of lines 1 through 10, even awaited to me, is to what? Well, we go to lines 1 through 10. We see that it's talking about how at school he learned to read and write before the other children. He saw words and he saw that they created a boundless world for him, right? A safe haven from home. So it's really stressing how important reading was to him and how passionate he was about it. So we go ahead and look at our answer choices. We have A, introduce the characters who play a part in the narrator's story. No, because we don't introduce any characters other than the narrator, right? And then B, list the difficult conditions the narrator endured in childhood. Well, not really, right? We don't really talk about difficult conditions in that. We're more just talking about his passion for reading, right? C, describe the passion that drives the actions the narrator recounts. Yes, that passion for reading that drives him to read when his dad tells him not to late at night, right? With the lights barely on so that way he doesn't get in trouble, where his passion leads him to read Charles Dickens and how he wants to become a writer after that, right? So our answer there is going to be C. We don't depict the narrator's aspirations either before he met Spirit. So our answer there is going to be C. Question 3. Which of the following statements about his father would the narrator most likely agree? He lacked affection for the narrator? No, he never says that, right? And then B, and it says he gives him coins, right, to go get treats. So definitely not A. B, he disliked any unnecessary use of money? No, right, he gave his son, once again, money to go buy treats, so that wouldn't be correct. C, he would not have approved of Saint-Pierre's gift. Yes, right, his father doesn't want him reading. He says once he's 10, he's going to throw all his books away, right? So our answer there is going to be C. And it doesn't say anything about his father objecting to Charles Dickens. Which choice provides the best evidence? All right, well, I know that him talking about his father throwing his books out, that was too early, right? That was right here at 11. But I see my evidence choices pretty much start at 24 and go to 61. But I also know that at 59 to 61, right, that last sort of paragraph, it says that if he brought that book home, or he says when he brings that book home, he's hiding it under his jacket. So I'm going to go ahead and look at 59 to 61. And I see that afternoon I took my new friend home, referring to his book, hidden under my clothes so that my father wouldn't see it, right? That's going to be our evidence because that's showing that his father wouldn't approve of that book Saint-Pierre gave him. So our answer is D. All right, it can reasonably be inferred from the passage that the main reason the narrator considers Great Expectations to be the best gift he ever received is because, like I said before, it's because it says that now he wants to be an author after reading that, right? So we read our answer choices. A, reading the book convinced him that he wanted to be a writer. Yes. Next choice is evidence, and I can go and show you where that is. That's this last part here. Soon I was convinced I didn't want to do anything else in life but learn to do what Mr. Dickens had done. What did Mr. Dickens do? He wrote. So that's going to be our evidence. We see that that's from 66 to 68. So that's going to be our evidence. That's choice D. All right, question 7. The narrator indicates that he pays Saint-Pierre. That's going to be less than what the books are worth, right? Less than what the books are worth, right? Because he says he only leaves a couple pennies or a couple, right, or whatever currency they were using, far less than what they were worth, right? So we've got less than Saint-Pierre expects him to pay for the books. No, because Saint-Pierre doesn't expect him to pay anything, right? He pretty much gives them to him for free, and the narrator just kind of leaves that money there just as a thank you, right? B, nothing. No, because it says he does give him some. C, the money he makes selling sweets. He doesn't sell sweets. That'd be if you misinterpreted the text. D, much less for the books than they are worth. Yes. As used in line 44, wait most nearly means what? Well, we go to line 44. We're going to circle wait. We do that. Now we're going to read that sentence and come up with our answer before we look at the answer choices so we aren't swayed by the answer choices. When it was time for me to leave, I would do so dragging my feet, a weight on my soul. Well, when we're talking about someone's soul, a commonplace thing to say would be, I have a burden on my soul, right? I'm dragging my feet. I have a burden on my soul. I'm not excited to leave. So I'm going to say burden if that is an answer choice. If not, I'm going to come up with the next best. I see I do have burden, right? We're not going to say he has a bulk in his heart, right? Or on his soul, a bulk in his soul, or a force in his soul, or a clout in his soul. We'd say he has a burden in his soul, right? All right, and then the word friend is used twice in lines 57 to 58 to do what? Well, I'm going to go find that, come up with my own answer choice. A lifelong friend, and from now on, he's your friend too. All right, so that's kind of telling us that to Saint-Pierre, he considers Dickens to be a friend of his, and also that when he gives this book away, right, he believes that that book will then cause Dickens to be a friend of our narrators as well. So we look at our answer choices. We have A, underline the importance of the narrator's connection to Saint-Pierre. No, we're talking about the Saint-Pierre's connection to Dickens, right? So that one's going to be wrong. B, stress how friendships help the narrator deal with his situation at home. The narrator's not talking in that one. It's Saint-Pierre. C, emphasize the emotional connection Saint-Pierre feels to reading. Yes, right? Saint-Pierre feels that Dickens is his friend just from reading that book. So that's going to emphasize his emotional connection to reading. And then D, imply the narrator's sentiments caused him to make an irrational decision. No, it doesn't say anything about an irrational decision or the narrator's sentiments. It's Saint-Pierre talking, so that one's way off base. And then question 10, which statement best characterizes the relationship between Saint-Pierre and Charles Dickens? All right, well, as we discussed, right, Sampier, he feels close to Dickens because of his writing, right? So we look at our answer choices. Also, Sampier really admires Charles Dickens' writing as well, right? He talks about how he considers it a friend. He talks about how good it is, right? So we got A, Sampier models his own writing after Dickens' style. No, it doesn't say Sampier's a writer. B, Sampier is an avid admirer of Dickens' work. Yes, right? He really likes it. When he says that it was, I'll go ahead and show you real quick. It was right here, right? It was an old volume read and experienced to the full, right? If something's read and experienced to the full, then someone's an avid admirer of that work. When we look at choice C, Sampier feels a personal connection to details of Dickens' biography. Well, we don't know. We don't really talk about Dickens' biography, right? We don't know if Great Expectations is a biography or not. It's not explicitly stated as far as I can tell. And then as far as Sampier feeling a personal connection, it never says that, right? So our answer is going to be B. And then D, Sampier considers himself to be Dickens' most appreciative reader. No, there's nothing like that, right? There's nothing saying where Sampier says, oh, I've read every single book and no one likes Dickens more than I do, right? No one likes Charles Dickens more than I do. So he never says that. So B will be our answer for 10. Now we can go ahead and move on to passage 2. Questions 11 to 21 are based on the following passage and supplementary material. This passage is adopted from Jeffrey Minervis' Why Null Results Rarely See the Light of Day, published in 2014 by American Association for the Advancement of Science. The question of what to do with null results when researchers fail to see an effect that should be detectable has long been hotly debated among those conducting medical trials, where the results can have a big impact on lives and corporate bottom lines. More recently, the debate has spread to the social and behavioral sciences, which also have the potential to sway public and social policy. There was little hard data, however, on how often or why null results were squelched. Yes, it's true that null results are not as exciting. Political scientist Gary King of Harvard University says, but I suspect another reason they are rarely published is that there are many, many ways to produce null results by messing up, so they are much harder to interpret. In a recent study, Stanford political economist Neil Malhotra and 2 of his graduate students examined every study since 2002 that was funded by a competitive grants program called TESS, which is the Time-Sharing Experiments for the Social Sciences. TESS allows scientists to order up internet-based surveys of a representative sample of U.S. adults to test a particular hypothesis. For example, whether voters tend to favor legislators who boast of bringing federal dollars to their districts over those who tout a focus on policy matters. Malhotra's team tracked down working papers from most of the experiments that weren't published, and for the rest asked grantees what had happened to their results. In their emailed responses, some scientists cited deeper problems with a study or more pressing matters, but many also believed the journals just wouldn't be interested in. The unfortunate reality of the publishing world is that null effects do not tell a clear story, said one scientist. Said another, never published, definitely disappointed to not see any major effects. Their answers suggest to Malhotra that rescuing findings from the file drawer will require a shift in expectations. What needs to change is the culture, the author's belief about what will happen if the research is written up, he says. Not unexpectedly, the statistical strength of the findings made a huge difference in whether they were published. Overall, 42% of the experiments produced statistically significant results. Of those, 62% were ultimately published, compared with 21% of the null results. However, the Stanford team was surprised that researchers didn't even write up 65% of the experiments that yielded a null finding. Scientists not involved in the study praise its clever design. It's a very important paper that starts to put numbers on things we want to understand, says economist Edward Miguel of the University of California, Berkeley. He and others note that the bias against null studies can waste time and money when researchers devise new studies replicating strategies already found to be ineffective. Worse, if researchers publish significant results from similar experiments in the future, they could look stronger than they should because the earlier null studies are ignored. Even more troubling to Malhotra was the fact that 2 scientists whose initial studies didn't work out went on to publish results based on a smaller sample. The non-test version of the same study, in which we used a student sample, did yield fruit, noted one investigator. A registry for data generated by all experiments would address these problems, the authors argue. They say it would include a pre-analysis plan, that is a detailed description of what the scientist hopes to achieve and how the data will be analyzed. Such plans would help deter researchers from tweaking their analysis after the data are collected in search of more publishable results. All right, now we've got our questions. We got question 11. The passage primarily serves to what? All right, well, we're describing a common practice in social science, right? About how null results kind of get hidden under the rug, whereas those yielding results are published more often, right? So it kind of is incentivizing people to put away their null results and not even write them up, right? Which is not good, because then it makes, when things are proven statistically significant, it could make it look stronger than it really is, right? So the passage, it starts out by explaining that practice, right? And then it uses a study, right, that talks about the publication of social science things in order to support its idea of changing that practice and building a database, right? So we see our answer there is going to be B, right? Explaining a common practice in the reporting of research studies, which is hiding null results under the rug and publishing strong results, and summarizing a study, right? That study that's basically said all that, that provides support for a change to the practice of the way social science is reported, right? So our answer there is going to be B. We're not discussing recent findings concerning scientific research. We're talking about social science. C, are we describing the shortcomings in current approaches to medical trials? We're not talking medical trials. Once again, we're talking social science. And D, provide context as part of a call for stricter controls on social science research and challenge publishers to alter their mindsets. Well, I mean, we kind of challenge publishers to alter their mindsets, but not really, right? We don't ever make a direct call on publishers to alter their mindsets. And then provide context as part, we're not really providing context, right? We're using a study to support our idea for change. And then as part of a call for stricter controls on social science research, we never make any explicit calls for stricter controls on social science research, right? The research is fine, it's just the way it's reported that we're arguing, right? So we can get rid of D. All right, question 12. As used in line 21, allows most nearly means. Well, I'm going to go to 21. I'm going to circle allows, right? Or underline it here because I don't really know if I got room to circle it. And then I'm going to come up with my own answer before I look at the answer choices. We have tests allows scientists to order up internet-based surveys of a representative sample of U.S. adults to test a particular hypothesis. All right, well, that means that test is enabling it, right? Test enables these scientists to order up these internet-based surveys, right? Not allows, or, well, I mean, enables means allows, right? So TESS enables these scientists to order up these surveys, just like it allows them. So our answer there is going to be enables if they have it. If not, we'll come up with a different choice. And we see we do have enables, right? We're not going to say that TESS grants scientists, TESS does not grant it, right? Because that would mean like TESS has permission, right? It has to give these scientists permission, and it doesn't. TESS tolerates, no, and TESS admits, no. That's human quality, grants human quality, tolerates human quality. TESS enables, right? It's giving them the ability to. It's allowing them. 13, as used in line 43, strength most nearly means. All right, I'm going to go find 43. I see it's right here. So we've got statistical strength. Not unexpectedly, so basically expectedly, we can get rid of that. The statistical strength of the findings made a huge difference in whether they were ever published. All right, that's going to be the statistical significance, right? Statistical strength means the same thing as statistical significance, so I'm going to look for significance, right? I see I have that. It's not statistical toughness. We wouldn't say that. Significance is a better choice there. Exertion, statistical exertion, that doesn't work, right? Statistics don't exert anything, and attribution also does not work. All right, 14. The passage indicates that a problem with failing to document null results is that what? Well, just like what it said, right? It said if we don't report these null results, it makes these results that are positive that show a relationship stronger than they may be because these null results are put under the rug. So we look at our answer choices. We have A, the results of related studies will be misleading, and that will be our answer for 14, right? The results of these related studies that may show a positive correlation between something are misleading because we swept the null results under the rug. So we can go ahead and find our answer choice for that. What I remember is I remember that we were talking about that. Let's try to think through where we're talking about that. We're talking about, I believe we're talking about that right around 59 to 62. So we'll go there, see if we can find it there. All right, we've got worse if researchers publish significant results from similar experiments. So we're publishing these significant results, right, from similar experiments in the future. They could look stronger than they should because the earlier null results are ignored, right? That's going to be our answer right there. So that's going to be from 59 to 62. So we'll go down, we'll find that answer choice, and we see that that is answer choice D. All right, now we can go ahead and go on to question 16. Based on the passage, which of the following hypothetical situations would Malhotra most strongly object? This one, we have to read the answer choices because we don't know what kind of situations they're going to give us. So we have A, a research team refuses to publish null results in anything less than a top journal. See, that would support what Malhotra, right? That's what he wants people to do. With null results, he wants that published. So we can get rid of A. B, a research team excludes the portion of data that produced null results when reporting its results in a journal. Now that is something that Malhotra would definitely strongly oppose, right? He wants no results reported. That's what he's advocating. And he actually gives an example where two researchers got rid of their no results and then took the ones that showed a correlation, right, that were statistically significant. And he says that that's bad. And I'm guessing we have an evidence question for the next one because of that, and we do. All right, so we can go ahead and find that evidence question. So we'll go ahead and find where that occurred. I believe that that was right here, right? The scientists' initial studies didn't work out. So we have from 62, we have even more troubling to Malhotra was the fact two scientists whose initial studies didn't work out went on to publish results based on a smaller sample. The non-test version of the same study in which we used a student sample did yield fruit, noted one investigator. So that's 62 to 68 is going to be our evidence for that question. 62 to 68. So that's going to be answer choice C. Now we've got question 18. All right, the last paragraph serves primarily to what? Well, we're going to go to our last paragraph, see what it says. If I remember correctly, it's proposing our solution with that registry. We see we have a registry for data generated by all experiments would address these problems. We go on to say that it should include pre-analysis plan, a detailed description of what they hope to achieve, how the data will be analyzed. This will help deter researchers from tweaking their analysis after they collect it in search of more publishable results. So we're advocating for a solution to the problems that we describe. All right, so we're proposing a solution. I'm looking for an answer choice that says that. We have A, propose a future research project. We are not doing that. B, introduce a possible solution. Yes, we are introducing a possible solution to problems discussed in the passage regarding the reporting of social science studies. So our answer there is going to be B. 19, according to the graph, social science studies yielding strong results were what? Well, we have to go to our graph. Yielding strong results is what it said, so we're going to find that. We see that yielding strong results is going to be here. What were they, right? We'll just see if look at our different boxes. So we have here, we've got that they were published in a top journal 20% of the time, published in a non-top journal from 80 to 40, so that'll be 40% of the time, unpublished but written from about 40 to about 5, so that'll be about 35, and then they were unwritten about 5% of the time, right? All right, so we're just going to go take a look at our answer choices now after interpreting it. I see that we have unwritten over 50% of the time. No, it was 5%, right? Unpublished but unwritten, unpublished but written 50% of the time. No, it was about 35. Published in a top journal about 20% of the time. Yes. All right, question 20. Which of the following statements is supported by the graph? So we've got studies with mixed results were just as likely to be published as they were to be left either unpublished or unwritten. We'll take a look at that. So we've got our mixed results. We're looking to see if they were just as likely to be published, so these top two boxes, as unpublished, but written or unwritten. So we would look for that at 50%, right? The bridge between this dark black box and the darker gray box, and we see that is at 50%, so that will be our answer. So our answer will be A. All right, question 21. Which statement from the passage is most directly reflected in the data presented in the graph? All right, well, what's the graph showing? We see that it's showing strong results are more likely to be published in top journals, right here, published in a non-top journal, right, and they are or published but unpublished but written, right, so they're more likely basically to get more attention. So we go ahead and look for our answer choice. We've got all these lines. So what I see is not unexpectedly unpublished. Well, our relationship in the graph is talking about publication, so I'm going to look at that one first. That's 43 to 45. Go find that. I've got 43 to 45. Not unexpectedly, so expectedly. The statistical strength of the findings made a huge difference in whether they were published. Yes, that's what the graph is showing. So that will be our answer there, and that is answer choice C for 21. Now we can go ahead and move on to passage 3. Questions 22 to 31 are based on the following passage and supplementary material. This passage is adapted from Rachel Ehrenberg, Salt Stretches in Nanoworld, published in 2009 by Society for Science and the Public. The nanoworld is the world observed on a scale 1/1000th that of ordinary human experience. All right, now I'm going to read the passage. If you've already read the passage, you can go ahead and skip about 3 minutes ahead to where I get into the answers. All right, inflexible old salt becomes a softy in the nanoworld, stretching like taffy to more than twice its length, researchers report. The findings may lead to new approaches for making nanowires that could end up in solar cells or electronic circuits. The work also suggests that these ultra-tiny salt wires may already exist in sea spray and large underground salt deposits. We think nanowires are special and go to great lengths to make them, says study co-author Nathan Moore of Sandia National Laboratories in Albuquerque. Maybe they are more common than we think. Metals such as gold or lead, in which bonding angles are loosey-goosey, can stretch out at temperatures well below their melting points. But scientists don't expect this superplasticity in a rigid, crystalline material like salt, Moore says. This unusual behavior highlights that different forces rule the nano world, says theoretical physicist Krzysztof Kempa of Boston College. Forget about gravity, it plays no role, he says. Surface tension and electrostatic forces are much more important at this scale. Moore and his colleagues discovered salt stretchiness accidentally. They were investigating how water sticks to a surface such as salt and created a super dry salt sample for testing. After cleaving a chunk of salt about the size of a sugar cube with a razor, the scientists guided a microscope that detects forces toward the surface. When the tip was far away, there was no measured force, but within about 7 nanometers, a very strong attraction rapidly developed between the diamond tip of the microscope and the salt. The salt was actually stretched out to glom on the microscope tip. Using an electron microscope to see what was happening, the researchers observed the nanowires. The initial attraction between the tip and the salt might be due to electrostatic forces, perhaps good old van der Waals interactions. The researchers speculate. Several mechanisms might lead to the elasticity, including the excess surface tension that found in the nano world, the same surface tension that allows a water strider to skim the surface of a pond. The surface tension is so strong that as the microscope pulls away from the salt stretches, Kempa says. The inside has no choice but to rearrange the atoms, rather than break, he says. This bizarre behavior is actually mirrored in the macro world, the researchers say. Huge underground deposits of salt can bend like plastic, but water is believed to play a role at these scales. Perhaps salty nanowires are present in these deposits as well. Sodium chloride is everywhere, in the air and our bodies, Moore says. This may change our view of things, of what's happening at the nanoscale. The work also suggests new techniques for making nanowires, which are often created through nanoimprinting techniques, Kempa says. We invoke the intuition of the macro world, he says. Maybe instead of stamping nanowires, we should be nanopulling them. All right, we can go ahead and get into the questions. I see I have a little graph there, so I'll probably have to refer to that on one of the last questions for this passage. So question 22. One central idea of the passage is what? All right, well, let's go ahead and go through our answer choices, or we'll come up with our own answer real quick. So a central idea of this passage, right, is about how this material, right, the salt, is now being able to stretch so far more than was ever expected, or than was initially expected. And it was kind of discovered accidentally, so it's not like they set out to do this, but it's kind of a surprise of how this material, this salt, can stretch out so far, and it's a big shock to this nano world, right? So we look at our answer choices. We have A, sometimes materials behave contrary to expectations. Yes, right, that salt, they didn't expect it to be able to do that because it was a crystalline, right? And crystallines generally don't stretch like that at the nano level. So they did not expect that to happen, right? But it did. So sometimes that material, that salt, behaves contrary to expectations, yes. We know B is incorrect because it says systems can be described in terms of inputs and outputs, and we don't describe inputs and outputs. C is incorrect because it says models of materials have both strengths and weaknesses. We don't discuss the strengths or weaknesses of the materials. And then D, or of the models of materials, all right, of their models that, would display their chemical elements and all of that. D is incorrect because it says properties of systems differ from the properties of their parts. Now here's why this is wrong. You may be initially tempted to pick this, but no, it's not correct because here's why. You may think, oh, well, at the nano level salt can stretch, but at the macro level it can't. But we actually say in the passage, at the macro level, we have observed salt stretching like that. So that's why D is incorrect as well. Question 23. Which choice best describes the overall structure of the passage? All right, well, we see in our passage, right, we begin, right, by describing this salt, or we'll go back and we'll go ahead and take a look at it. So in the beginning, we talk about how inflexible old salt becomes a softy in the nano world. So how we get a change in expectations, right? At the nano level, we didn't think that it'd be able to be flexible, right? But it is. It stretches to more than twice its length, right? So we begin with that. Then we get into how it was discovered, right? That accidental discovery with that diamond tip microscope. And then after that, we get into potential applications of it, right? And like what the meaning of all this is, or what the meaning of this discovery is, and how it can be used. So we got a list of several ways in which salt properties differ from researchers' expectations. No, we don't make a list of several ways. Also, that doesn't include how it was discovered. A presentation of a hypothesis. We don't start with a hypothesis, right? So we can go ahead and get rid of B. C, a description of 2 salt crystal experiments, the apparent disagreement. We don't have a disagreement, and we don't have 2 salt crystal experiments. D, an introduction to an interesting salt property, right? That is stretchy. and then a description of its discovery, that it was an accidental discovery, and then speculation about its application for use in electronic components and such. So our answer is D. Which choice provides the best evidence for the claim that Moore's group was surprised to observe salt stretching? That's going to be when they talk about it as a crystal light, right? When it talks about it as a crystal light, so they wouldn't expect this to occur. So we're going to find right here, or a crystalline material, right? But scientists don't expect the superplasticity in a rigid crystalline material like salt, Moore says. So we see that that is going to be from 17 to 18. That's going to be my evidence lines. Find that, and I see that that's an answer choice A. So A will be my answer for 24. As used in line 20, rule most nearly means. I'm going to go find line 20. I'm going to underline the word rule, and then I'm going to try and find what it most nearly means. This unusual behavior highlights that different forces rule the nano world, says theoretical physicist. All right, well, this means that different forces control the nano world, right? Or govern, right? They control the nano world is going to be the best choice. Govern, I mean, I wouldn't really make that my first choice, but it could be a backup choice. I would strongly say control here. So now I'm going to go look at my answer choices. See what we got. We do have control, so that'll be my answer. We're not going to say that these forces mark the nano world or declare the nano world or restrain the nano world, right? But they do control the nano world. All right. 26, according to the passage, researchers have identified which mechanism as potentially responsible for the initial attraction between the microscope tip and the salt. All right, well, if we remember back, it suggests that it was van der Waals interactions. The surface tension is talking about a different thing, right? And I'll go show you that real quick. When we go back up here, we see the initial attraction between the tip and salt might be due to electrostatic forces, perhaps good old van der Waals interactions, right? So it's suggesting that could be responsible for our attraction there. Right, where you would mess up is if you took this surface tension from this sentence here when we talk about how the several mechanisms might lead to the elasticity, right? All right, now we can go and move on to our next question. We see that we are on, where are we? We've got question 27. As used in line 42, lead to most nearly means. Go find lead to. We've got it right here, okay. Several mechanisms might lead to the elasticity, including the excessive surface tension found in the nano world. All right, well, several mechanisms then, right, might result in this elasticity or might cause it. So my two answers here, my backup's going to be cause. First one's going to be resultant, right? So I'm looking for really resultant. If that's not there, cause would be my second choice here. Right, because we have several mechanisms might result in this elasticity or cause this elasticity, right? But preferably resultant would be a better choice in my opinion. So I'm going to go look for those. I see I do have resultant, I don't have cause, right? We're not going to say that these several mechanisms might guide to or point toward or start with, right? They're going to result in that surface tension or whatever it was talking about. Let's see. They will result in the elasticity. Yep. Okay. Yep. So we've got question 28 now. Based on the passage, which choice best describes the relationship between salt behavior in the nano world and in the macro world? Well, if we remember in the macro world, do we have to provide evidence? Yes, we do. Okay, so I can go ahead and give that to you anyways. All right, well, I know, I'll go ahead and answer the claim real quick first. We know that in both the nano world and the macro world, salt is flexible, so our answer is going to be A, right? And I'll go ahead and show you my evidence for that. All right, it's where they talk about the big salt things, right? And then the water, and it makes them flexible. Try to find where that is real quick. All right, let's see. Perhaps salty nanowires, more nano. Let's see here. It is going to be, okay, here it is. Huge underground deposits of salt can bend like plastic, but water is believed to play a role at these scales, right? That's talking about how in the macro world, it also can bend like plastic. And that's from 51 then to that 53. That's going to be my answer there. All right, let's see. There it is. Answer choice D for 29. All right, now we are on question 30. According to the information in the graph, when the microscope tip is moving away, so we're looking at the graph, it's moving away from the salt surface and is 15 nanometers from the surface. What's the approximate force on the microscope tip in micronewtons? All right, I'm going to go to my graph. I have to use the one where it's moving away and then look at 15 nanometers. We see I'm moving away from the salt surface. I'm asked for the force on the tip in micronewtons at that point. I see that's about 0.75. So my answer there will be choice C. All right, question 31. Based on the passage and graph, which label on the graph indicates the point at which a salt nanowire breaks? All right, well, when it breaks, there's going to be no more force, right? And it's only going to break after it's connected. So that's going to be when it's moving away from the graph, or when it's moving away from the salt, right? So the tip's moving away from the salt. It's going to break. There will no longer be that force on that tip, which is where it's going to equal 0, right? So that's going to tell me my answer there is going to be T. So I'm going to go find T. I see that that is answer choice D, so my answer choice will be D. All right, we have answered all of them for that section, or that passage. We move on to passage 4, which questions 32 to 41 are based on. These passages are adopted from the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Passage 1 is from a statement by Stephen Douglas, and passage 2 is from a statement by Abraham Lincoln. Douglas and Lincoln engaged in a series of debates while competing for a U.S. Senate seat in 1858. All right, passage 1. Mr. Lincoln likens that bond of the federal Constitution joining free and slave states together to a house divided against itself, and says that it is contrary to the law of God and cannot stand. When did he learn, and by what authority does he proclaim that this government is contrary to the law of God and cannot stand? It has stood thus divided into free and slave states from its organization up to this day. During that period, we have increased from 4 millions to 30 millions of people. We have extended our territory from the Mississippi to the Pacific Ocean. We have acquired the Floridas and Texas and other territories sufficient to double our geographical extent. We have increased in population, in wealth, and in power beyond any example on earth. We have risen from a weak and feeble power to become the terror and admiration of the civilized world, and all this has been done under a constitution which Mr. Lincoln, in substance, says is in violation of the law of God, and under a union divided into free and slave states, which Mr. Lincoln thinks, because of such division, cannot stand. Surely Mr. Lincoln is a wiser man than those who framed the government. I now come back to the question, why cannot this union exist forever, divided into free and slave states as our fathers made it? It can thus if each state will carry out the principles upon which our institutions were founded, to wit, the right of each state to do as it pleases, without meddling with its neighbors. Just act upon that great principle, and this union will not only live forever, but it will extend and expand until it covers the whole continent and makes this confederacy one grand ocean-bound republic. We must bear in mind that we are yet a young nation growing with a rapidity unequaled in the history of the world, that our national increase is great, and that our emigration from the old world is increasing, requiring us to expand and acquire new territory from time to time, in order to give our people land to live on. If we live upon the principle of state rights and state sovereignty, each state regulating its own affairs and minding its own business, we can go on and extend indefinitely, just as fast and as far as we need the territory. All right, I'm going to go ahead and answer the questions that are on passage 1 only, and then I'll read passage 2. 32. In the first paragraph of passage 1, the main purpose of Douglas's discussion of the growth of the territory and population of the United States is to what? Well, if we go back and we look at his discussion of the growth of the territory, we see that he talks about how Mr. Lincoln says that a house divided against itself cannot stand, and says that it's contrary to the law of God, but then he says, by what authority does he proclaim? And that this government is contrary to the law of God and cannot stand. It has stood divided, and during that period we've done all these things. So it's him proving that we can stand divided and still move and expand our lands, right? So his main purpose of discussing the growth of the territory and population of the United States is to, we have A, provide context for Douglas's defense of continued expansion. Well, that's not really what he's discussing, right? He's discussing how we've done it all while divided, like well we've had slave and free states. B suggests the division into free and slave states doesn't endanger the union, right? If we're referring to union as both like all of America, then that could work. And then I look at C, imply that Lincoln is unaware of basic facts concerning the country. No, he's not really implying that Lincoln's unaware of basic facts concerning the country. Or D, account for the image of the United States as powerful and admirable. No. Our answer is going to be B, right? He's suggesting the division into free and slave states is not putting us in danger because we've expanded so far, right? We've expanded from the north. We've expanded out west, right? We've made expansions while we've been in free and slave states. All right, now look at question 33. Question 33 states, what does passage 1 suggest about the U.S. government's provision for the institution of slavery as framed in the Constitution? All right, well, if we think about what the author of passage 1 is saying, right, his main argument here is that the Constitution is good, it's been working so far, and nothing else needs to change. So our answer then is going to be C. They provided a good basic structure that doesn't need to be changed, right? It's not going to be A. A says they included no means for reconciling differences between free states and slave states. That's not what he's necessarily suggesting. He's just suggesting it's worked so long, we don't need to change it. B, they anticipated the Union's expansion. He never made that argument. D, they were founded on an assumption that slavery was necessary for economic growth. We never touch on economic growth and the need for slavery there. So our answer there is going to be C, right? He argues that it's basic structure that doesn't have to be changed because it's worked, right? We've gotten all this expansion according to him. All right, and then which choice best provides the answer to this question? Well, if we think about it, we're talking about where he's suggesting things about the Constitution, so it makes sense that it'd be somewhere around where he's discussing that in like that middle of the sort of beginning, right here, right, where he says, I now come back to the question, why cannot this union, or he talks about the Constitution right here, right? But that wasn't really any of our answer choices except for I think around 15. But if we look down at 25, which was answer choice B, I believe, we have, I now come back to the question, why cannot this union exist forever? Right, so he's saying that Constitution's good, union can exist forever, we don't have to change things. Divided into free and slave states, as our fathers made it, right, constitutional founders. So saying Constitution's good, he's saying that nothing has to change, right, we can just rely on that. So that's going to be 25 to 27 for our evidence there. So that answer there is going to be B. All right, so that shows how they provided a good basic structure, right, that doesn't need to be changed according to the author passage 1. And his argument is that, hey, we've made it this far now, we don't need to change anything, right? So question 35. Let's see here. Question 35. As used in line 67, element most nearly means what? All right, but it has been so with this element of slavery. Well, we need to get some context here. So we're going to go ahead and move up to line 60, and we'll go down from there. So we see line 60, it says, or we'll go 61. Or because we have a different class relative to the production of flour in this state. Have they produced any differences? Not at all. They are the very cements of the union. They don't make a house divided against itself. They are props that hold up the house and sustain this union. But has it been so with this element or issue of slavery, right? This element of slavery, saying the subject of slavery, the issue of slavery. All right, so we go down, we look at our answer choices there. This factor, right, this element, this factor of slavery, not ingredient, right, we're not talking cooking, not environment, and not quality. Has it been so with this factor of slavery, right, this issue of slavery? All right, question 36. Based on passage 2, Lincoln would be most likely to agree with which claim about the controversy over slavery? All right, well, if we go and we read passage 2, right, which I should have read passage 2 when I got to that question. So I'll go ahead and read it now. In complaining of what I said in my speech at Springfield, in which he says I accepted my nomination for the senatorship, he again quotes that portion in which I said that a house divided against itself cannot stand. Let me say a word in regard to that matter. He tries to persuade us that there must be a variety in the different institutions of the states of the Union, and that variety necessarily proceeds us from the variety of soil, climate, of the face of the country, and the differences in the natural features of the states. I agree to all that. Have these very matters ever produced any difficulty among us? Have we ever had any quarrel over the fact that they have laws in Louisiana designated to regulate the commerce that springs from the production of sugar, or because we have a different class relative to the production of flour in the United States, or in this state? Have they produced any difference? Not at all. They are the very cement of this union. They don't make a house divided against itself. They are the props that hold up the house and sustain the union. But has it been so with this element of slavery? Right, and then right there, obviously, has it been so with this issue like I explained before? Has it been so with this element of slavery? And I should have read the second passage before I answered that question, so that's my bad. All right, but has it been so with this element of slavery? Have we not always had quarrels and difficulties over it? And when will we cease to have quarrels over it? Like causes produce like effects. It is worthwhile to observe that we have generally had comparative peace upon the slavery question, and that there has been no cause for alarm until it was excited by the effort to spread it into new territory. Whenever it has been limited to its present bounds and there has been no effort to spread it, there has been peace. All the trouble and convulsion that has proceeded from efforts to spread it over more territory. It was thus at the date of the Missouri Compromise. It was so again with the annexation of Texas, so with the territory acquired by the Mexican War, and it is so now. Whenever there have been an effort to spread it, there has been an agitation and resistance. Do you think that the nature of man will be changed? That the same causes that produced agitation at one time will not have the same effect at another? All right, so like I said, I should have read passage 2 before I actually answered question 35, but it's kind of too late for that now, so we'll go ahead and answer question 36. Based on passage 2, Lincoln would be most likely to agree with which claim about the controversy over slavery? Well, if you look at everything I underlined up there, his claim isn't actually that it should be abolished right now. His claim is that we shouldn't add it to new territories, right? So he was a free soiler, if you remember that, if you took AP U.S. history or just any kind of U.S. history. So his claim is that B, it would be a bait if attempts to introduce slavery to regions where it is not practiced were abandoned, right? The argument and debate over this, right, the controversy, it wouldn't exist if we just stopped trying to expand it into territories that we add, right? So our answer there is going to be B. Next up, we probably have evidence. Yep, we do. So we can go and look at where I underline those things, right? We have it right around here, right? Whenever it has been limited to its present bounds and there has been no effort to spread it, there has been peace. So that could be one evidence, right? So that's 74 to 76. I'll see if we have that because that's pretty good. So we got that, we do. So our answer there is going to be C, right? Because that's explaining why if we stop trying to introduce into new territories, there would be peace, according to Lincoln. Now we have question 38. As used in line 84, nature most nearly means what? I find line 84. I underline nature. Once I do that, I read the sentence and then I solve for what it would most nearly mean, and then I go to my answer choices and see what matches or what is closest. Do you think that the nature of man will be changed, that the same causes that produced agitation at one time will not have the same effect at another? Well, that'd be like, do you think that the character of man, right? The nature, the morals, do you think that the morals of man or character of man will be changed? Those are what I'm looking for there, preferably character, but if we have morals, that would be a good second choice as well. See, we do have character D. We have world, simplicity, and force. The only one that was anything close to what we had interpreted and predicted is character. So our answer is going to be D, character. Question 39. Which choice identifies a central tension between the two passages? All right. The big tension here is Lincoln is arguing, no, we cannot expand slavery into new territories, whereas Douglas is saying, yes, we can. That's the big, big tension, right? So we have A, Douglas proposes changes to federal policy on slavery, but Lincoln argues that such changes would enjoy no popular support. That's not the argument. B, Douglas expresses concerns about the economic impact of abolition. That's not the main argument either. C, Douglas criticizes Lincoln for finding fault with the Constitution. That is true. And Lincoln argues that this criticism misrepresents his position. That is also true. So that's quite probably our answer. We look at D, Douglas offers an interpretation of federal law. We're not really talking about federal law. We don't really delve into that really. That conflicts with Lincoln's. We're not really arguing over interpretation of laws here, right? And Lincoln isn't implying his reason on this interpretation of a law is not well reasoned. Our answer there is going to be C. Question 40. Both passages discuss the issue of slavery in relationship to what? Well, that is going to be the expansion of the Union. Because if we remember back, passage 2, that's pretty much the whole argument, right? So passage 2, that's obvious. But if we remember back to passage 1, when in the beginning, I think it was, Douglas is the author of passage 1, right? Douglas is making the argument that, hey, we expanded this Union, and all while we did that, we had free states and slave states. We can continue to do this because we're still expanding, so that it doesn't look like there's any problems to Douglas. Right, that's Douglas's perspective. So they both do discuss the relationship of the Union, right? Or they discuss the issue of slavery in relationship to the expansion of the Union. So our answer is going to be A for 40. 41. In the context of each passage as a whole, the questions in line 25 to 27 of passage 1 and 67 to 69 of passage 2 refer primarily function to help each speaker do what? All right, we'll go find those 25 to 27 in passage 1. 25 to 27. All right. I now come back to the question, why cannot this Union state exist forever, divided into free and slave states as our fathers made it? It can thus exist if each state will carry out the principles, right? So basically, this is trying to undermine Lincoln's position that it can't exist forever, right? When Lincoln says a house divided can't exist forever, basically, he's saying, oh, yes, it can. So he's trying to undermine Lincoln's point. We look at our other one, I believe it was 67 to 69. But has it been so with the element of slavery, right? Because this is where Douglas was making the argument that, hey, these differences in states has what has kept us together, right? The fact we can have different tax policies and etc. But Lincoln is saying, well, yeah, okay, different tax policies has helped us, right, stay together. But have we ever had riots and had fights over tax policies? No. But we have over slavery, right? Slavery is a bigger issue. Have we, right, he says, have we not always had quarrels and difficulties over slavery? Because we have. So he's trying to undermine Douglas's argument. So each one is trying to undermine the other's argument when they do that. So our answer there is going to be D, right? They're not criticizing the other's methods because we don't even discuss methods. They don't cast doubt on sincerity. They both believe each other is saying what they mean and what they feel, and they're not reproaching each other's actions either. Our answer there will be D. All right, we can move on to the last passage. Questions 42 to 52 are based on the following. This passage is adopted from Daniel Kamovitz' What a Plant Knows, A Field Guide to the Senses, published in 2012 by Daniel Kamovitz. The Venus flytrap, Dianae muscipula, needs to know when an ideal meal is crawling across its leaves. Closing its trap requires a huge expense of energy, and reopening the trap can take several hours. So Dione A only wants to spring closed when it's sure that the dawdling insect visiting its surface is large enough to be worth its time. The large black hairs on their lobes allow the Venus flytraps to literally feel their prey, and they act as triggers that spring the trap closed when the proper prey makes its way across the trap. If the insect touches just one hair, the trap will not spring shut, but a large enough bug will likely touch 2 hairs within about 20 seconds. And that signal springs the Venus flytrap into action. We can look at this system as analogous to short-term memory. First, the flytrap encodes the information, forms the memory, that something it doesn't know what has touched one of its hairs. Then it stores this information for a number of seconds, retains the memory, and finally retrieves this information, recalls the memory, once a second hair is touched. If a small ant takes a while to get from one hair to the next, the trap will have forgotten the first touch by the time the ant brushes up against the next hair. In other words, it loses the storage of the information, doesn't close, and the ant happily meanders on. How does the plant encode and store the information from the unassuming bug's encounter with the first hair? How does it remember the first touch in order to react upon the second? Scientists have been puzzled by these questions ever since John Burton Sanderson's early report on the physiology of the Venus flytrap in 1882. A century later, Dieter Hodek and Andreas Sievers at the University of Bonn in Germany proposed that the flytrap stored information regarding how many hairs have been touched in the electric charge of its leaf. Their model is quite elegant in its simplicity. In their studies, they discovered that touching a trigger hair on the Venus flytrap causes an electric action potential, a temporary reversal in the electrical polarity of a cell membrane. That induces calcium channels to open in the trap. This coupling of action potentials and the opening of calcium channels is similar to the process that occurred during communications between human neurons, thus causing a rapid increase in the concentration of calcium ions. They propose that the trap requires a relatively high concentration of calcium in order to close, and that a single action potential from just one trigger hair being touched does not reach this level. Therefore, a second hair needs to be stimulated to push the calcium concentration over this threshold and spring the trap. The encoding of the information requires maintaining a high enough level of calcium so that a second increase triggered by touching the second hair pushes the total concentration of calcium over the threshold. As the calcium ion concentrations dissipate over time, if the second touch and potential don't happen quickly, the final concentration after the second trigger won't be high enough to close the trap, and the memory is lost. Subsequent research supports this model. Alexander Volkoff and his colleagues at Oakwood University in Alabama first demonstrated that it is indeed electricity that causes the Venus flytrap to close. To test the model, they rigged up very fine electrodes and applied electrical current to the open lobes of the trap. This made the trap close without any direct without any direct touch to its trigger hairs. While they didn't measure calcium levels, the current likely led to increases. When they modified this experiment by altering the amount of electrical current, Volkov could determine the exact electrical charge needed for a trap to close. As long as 14 microcoulombs, a tiny bit more than the static electricity generated by rubbing two balloons together, flowed between the two electrodes, the trap closed. This could come as one large burst or as a series of smaller charges within 20 seconds. If it took longer than 20 seconds to accumulate the total charge, the trap would remain open. All right, now we can get into the questions. We have question 42. The primary purpose of the passage is to what? All right, well, the primary purpose here is to discuss the Venus flytrap, right, and its closing action, giving all the scientific explanation behind it, right? So if we look at 42, we have choice A, discuss findings that offer a scientific explanation for the Venus flytrap's closing action. Yes, right, that's what our findings are all about. It's all about discussing the scientific explanation for why the Venus flytrap closes the way it does. We look at B, present research that suggests the Venus flytrap's predatory behavior is both complex and unique among plants. We don't discuss whether it's unique among plants. We don't know if other plants have it, right? I mean, I'm sure scientifically we do, but it's never discussed, so we can't pick that as an answer. C, identify the process by which the Venus flytrap's closing action has evolved. Okay, this is the key part as to why this is wrong. We don't discuss the evolution of the flytrap's mechanism for closing. So we can get rid of C. D, provide a brief overview of the Venus flytrap and its predatory behavior. We don't discuss its predatory behavior outside of it being, right, it just closing its thing, right? It's all about offering our scientific explanation for the closing action. 43, based on the passage, a significant advantage of the Venus flytrap's requirements for multiple triggers is what? Well, the reason it has multiple triggers is so that it doesn't close too early and waste its energy, right? So it's going to safeguard that plant's energy supply, because if it didn't have that multiple triggers, It could close and miss the insect or whatever, and it has to wait another 6 hours, and it wasted all that energy, right, and it's closing. So our answer there is going to be C, safeguard the plant's energy supply. We're asked for evidence, right? I know that that was in the beginning, so I'm going to go look there. It specifically talks about the energy that it takes. We see in line 3, closing its trap requires a huge expense of energy, and reopening the trap can take several hours. So Dionia only wants to spring close when it's sure the dawdling insect visiting the surface is large enough to be worth its time. So we see that that's 3 to 7, and that's explaining why it doesn't want to waste that energy. So our answer will be A for question 44. 45, the use of the phrases dawdling insect in line 6, happily meanders in line 27, and unassuming bugs encounter in 28 to 29, in the first 2 paragraphs establishes a tone that is what? Well, I'll go ahead and go there, right, just to show you guys. So we got line 6, dawdling insect. It only wants to spring close when it's sure the dawdling insect, right, visiting its surface is large enough to be worth its time. Well, this is kind of informal, right? Let's think about this. This is a scientific article, right? Science. So we should be using formal words, but this is not, right? Saying a dawdling insect, we don't really describe insects as dawdling if we're writing a scientific paper, if that makes sense. We don't have to describe, right? Like, you don't have to use adjectives like that, right? So that's kind of informal for this type of piece. I know we had another one from right here, line 28 and 27, right? So how does the plant encode and store the information from the unassuming bug's encounter with the first hair? We don't need to know that it's an unassuming bug, right? That's kind of informal again. We don't need that. It's not really scientific. So that's creating that informal tone, right? And then our last one, I think, was in line 10. Trap closed when the proper, no, it wasn't in line 10. Let's see. Line 27 and 28 and 29. Okay, so happily meanders, right? And the ant happily meanders on. We would never say an ant happily meanders on if we were trying to establish a formal tone, really. So that's kind of, once again, going back to that informal tone. We know it's not melodramatic because that just means overdramatic if you didn't know what that means, and it's not overdramatic. A, academic, right? That's not academic, it's informal. Mocking, no, we're not mocking anything. That's kind of a terrible answer choice. So don't pick D, pick C. C is correct. All right, question 46. In the second paragraph, lines 15 to 31, the discussion of short-term memory primarily functions to what? Well, if we think back, it was in probably line 15 or 16, right? It said that it was analogous to the short-term memory, right? When we say something's analogous to something and then we explain the comparison between the two, what we're doing is we're kind of clarifying our term, right? So we're using that analogy of it to the short-term memory to clarify an explanation of what prompts the Venus flytrap to close. So our answer is going to be A, right? And I'll just go quick show you guys that where it says that it's analogous. Well, right here, we can look at the system as analogous to short-term memory, right? And then we describe the two things alongside each other. So our answer for 46 is going to be A. It's not going to be B, advance a controversial hypothesis, because we don't have one. C, stress the distinction between the strategies of the Venus flytrap and the strategies of human beings. That's too vague. Strategies of what, right? And also, it's just not even accurate as far as what happened in the text. D, emphasize the Venus flytrap's capacity for retaining detailed information about its prey. No, that's not why we did that. We did that to help clarify the explanation of what prompts the Venus flytrap to close. Question 47. According to the passage, which statement best explains why the Venus flytrap requires a second trigger hair to be touched within a short amount of time in order for its trap to close? That's so it doesn't waste its energy, right? It needs that second trigger hair, so that way it knows its prey is large enough and not moving fast enough, so it won't miss it and it will get a big meal. So we have the choices. A, the second trigger. Okay, so it looks like we're talking more about the scientific part here. What it said back there, and I'm guessing we have evidence for 48 as well. We don't? Okay. So 47, what it was saying back there is it was saying that that second trigger hair, right, releases that second part of that calcium concentration that puts it above the threshold for it to close. So our answer for 47 is going to be D. That second trigger provides a necessary supplement to the calcium concentration released by that first trigger. And I'll quickly go show you guys the evidence for that. Let me find it. All right, right here. The encoding of the information requires a high enough level of calcium so that a second increase triggered by touching the second hair pushes the total concentration of calcium over the threshold. So that would be evidence if they asked for it, but they don't. So I was just showing you that to prove my point. 48, which choice describes a scenario in which Rhodea and Saver's model predicts that a Venus flytrap will not close around an insect? All right, will not close. So I'm giving examples. I'm just going to read through them. A large insect's second contact with the plant's trigger hair results in a total calcium ion concentration above the plant's threshold. That means that it will close, right? And we're asked for will not, so we can get rid of A because it will close. B, a large insect makes contact with a second trigger hair after a period of inactivity. during which calcium ion concentrations have diminished appreciably. This means since it was inactive, calcium ion concentrations have gone down, which means that second trigger here won't push it above that threshold. So we know B will be our answer and it will not close. In that situation, we can get rid of C and D. As used in line 67, demonstrated most nearly means. I'm going to go to 67, I'm going to underline it, come up with my own answer before I look at my answer choices so I'm not swayed. Subsequent research supports this model. Alexander Volkov and his colleagues at Oakwood University in Alabama first demonstrated that it is indeed electricity that causes Venus flytrap to close. All right, another word we could use here would be established or first showed or proved. Primarily, though, I'm looking for first proved or established would be my two top choices there. So I'm going to go down, I'm going to look at my answer choices. I don't have proved, but I do have established, right? It's not going to be protested because this demonstrated here is pretty much saying that they proved that this happens, right? They established it happens, right? Not performed and not argued. It's not an opinion, so it's not going to be argued, and it's not performed, so not performing anything. Definitely not protested. All right, so B is going to be the answer for 49. Question 50. Based on the passage, what potential criticism might be made of Volkov's testing of Rhodea and Siever's model? All right, what jumped out to me as I read it was that it said, I'll go ahead and show you guys, and it might be asking for evidence, I don't know. So just in case it is, I'll find the lines as well. Let's see where it is. So it was right here, right? So an important part of, let's see what their names were. An important part of Rhodea and Siever's model, right, was about the, let's see where it is, the calcium channels, right, and the calcium concentration, calcium levels right here, right? So while they didn't measure calcium levels, the current likely led to increases in calcium levels, but they didn't measure them. So that would be my big thing I'm looking at there. I see that that's going to be lines 71 to 74. So that would be my evidence if they ask for it, which I'm guessing they will. Let's see here. Okay, they do ask for evidence, and now I'm going to go and circle my answer, right? So my answer here is, the main criticism here is that they didn't do anything with the calcium levels. So we have A, Volkov's understanding of Rhodea and Siever's model was incorrect. No. B, Volkov's measurement did not corroborate a central element of Rhodea and Siever's model. Yes, that calcium level. It didn't measure that. So that's going to be B, right? And then we already answered C for 51. 52, based on the passage in studying the Venus flytrap, Volkov and his colleagues made the most extensive use of which type of evidence? That's going to be the data that they got, right? The data by using all those electric currents and then measuring the Venus flytrap's response. So choice A says mathematical models to predict the electrical charge. Required to close the Venus flytrap? No, they didn't really use mathematical models, right? It was just kind of taking that data and analyzing it from the work where they use the different electrical currents, right? So we have B, analysis of data collected from previous researchers' work involving the flytrap's response to electricity. That is also incorrect because it was their research, right? Not previous researchers. We can get rid of that. C, information obtained from monitoring the Venus flytrap's response to varying amounts of electrical current. Yes, right? It was their own little experiment, their own data, right? And it was all about the flytrap's response to the varying amounts of electrical current to find what was the threshold current. So our answer there is going to be C. Thank you for watching Preeminent Test Prep. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share as we will be releasing more videos to help you prepare for the SAT.